Bobby the Prop Buys In by David Corbett. It was midnight, and Bobby Roper sat in the office of the Eucalyptus Room watching his boss, Sal Lazzarini, run a tape on the week's damage. Sundays, Sal closed at 11 to tally things up, kicking out the last of the weekend losers. They'd sit there at the sucker tables till daybreak if you let them, pissing away a year's worth of alimony, the balloon payment on the mortgage, the kids' tuition. It hurt, Sal told Bobby, giving them the boot. A card room's bread and butter, types like that, but you had to run the numbers sometime. Sal squinted in the lamplight at his desk as he punched the figures into his adding machine. He was a beefy man, gone jowly and soft-muscled at 60, but still imposing, even sitting down. He had impeccably combed white hair and a broad, pockmarked face that withered up, eyes narrowing to slits when he inhaled from his cigarette. "Little skinks are stealing me blind." He shook his head, studying the total for the cage drawer shortages from his cashiers. "Amounts are insane." Bobby sat on the big white sofa across from Sal's desk, the only employee left, the others having long ago headed home. He could speak freely. "So ask somebody. Make an example. Where you been? Last month alone, 2, okay? Sent the little thieves packing. Guess who hired them back?" He meant his partner, Phil Vogel. Phil provided the capital for the card room, Sal the gambling know-how, a not uncommon arrangement. It brought with it not uncommon problems. Phil came from old Hillsborough money, the family black sheep, and like most guys of that stripe, he was scared down deep. He tried to cover up by playing the big shot, but he knew it was all a lie, and so he drank. The drink, it made him an easy play. "Show up in a leather skirt and a wonder bra," Sal said. "Tease your hair like cotton candy. Phil can't feel for you fast enough." Sal turned to the floor shorts next. From time to time, the chip girls snuck loans from their aprons to gamblers, hoping by shift's end to make it all back with interest. "You try and tell him, guy's already on a downslide when he hits you up. Luck don't change in here. It's what the place is for." Sal made a little moaning sigh as he licked his pencil tip, then entered the sums in his ledger. "Of course, I say that, make them cover the shortage. I'm a prick, right? Old Phil, he's all, 'Now, baby, don't cry.'" Last, Sal ran the tally on the bum chits and dubious checks Phil had okayed. Tearing off the tape, he tossed it across the desk. "That's 23 grand right there." The scroll of white paper fluttered like a tiny kite through Bobby's fingers. "1 week, understand? The chits are fucking gone, okay? Be a miracle we ever make good on them. And 60 to 80% of the check's gonna sail right back NSF or with a stop order." Sal uncapped the fifth of Cutty Sark he kept in his desk and freshened his glass. "That's my partner. Him and that pack of wind merchants he calls friends." He swirled the scotch in his glass, studying it like it helped him think. "Sick of it, Bobby. Only a matter of time before he fucks us all. Which gets us back to me and you." He scratched his stubbled cheek with his knuckles and sat back in his chair, rocking a little, away from the lamplight. "So, got something for me?" Bobby unbuttoned his sport coat, squirming forward in his seat. He'd been dreading this part. "Sal, that's what I've been meaning." "You ain't got it." "I got most." "Most? What's most? How much we talking about?" "My player's bank in the vault there, it's 18. 18? Sal, incredulous, patted his waxy white hair. "You come here to insult me with 18? "I've got the rest." "On ya?" "Yeah, well, here's the deal." "You gonna tell me 18 is it? Total?" "The other two's promised to me." Sal cackled. "Promised? Christ, I love that." Then it hit him. 2. You think 20's gonna... Sal, hear me out, okay? You said 20? Never. Sal, don't take that tone. It's not right. Fuck right. It's 50 a point, always has been. Where you been, the 80s? Sal, there's no need to yell, okay? I'm sitting right here. You think I don't know my own damn numbers? Look, let me tell you the deal. Midnight's the goddamn deadline, Bobby, I told you. Partnership agreement spells it out. Gotta cut off share at some point. It's the legalities. Sal, I realize, yeah, but listen, okay? Bobby hated what he had to say next, not because it wasn't true. It just made him feel weak. Trink, the asthma. She's had these doctor bills you wouldn't believe. Sal stiffened, cocking his head. Shut up. Sal, I said shut the fuck up. He squinted, cocking his ear toward the door as he stubbed out his smoke. In a whisper, You don't hear that? Bobby leaned in, whispering back, Hear what? Sal shimmied open the top drawer of his desk, withdrew a small nickel-plated revolver, and checked the cylinder for live rounds. Stay put. He nodded toward the door behind his desk, leading from his office out the back way into the employee parking lot. Anything goes bad, you run, understand? Don't play hero. Sal struggled from his chair and edged across the room. The pistol looked toy-like in his hand, but even so, Bobby eyed it like it might suddenly fly up like a bat and sail across the room straight at him. In the doorway, Sal craned his neck to peer down the dark hall out toward the cage. I'll be right back. Bobby sat mesmerized, watching Sal disappear. 5 seconds passed. 10. Hey, who the hell? A gun blast erupted in the hallway. A deafening, tinny echo rippled along the walls. Bobby dropped from his chair to the floor, covering his ears, ashamed at his cowardice. Straightening up, but still on his knees, he called out, Sal, you okay? A stranger entered the doorway. Medium build, medium height, nothing to distinguish him but what he wore. Ratty black turtleneck under a limp brown suit, ski mask hiding his face. He had to tip his head back and a little to the side to see out the eye holes, the mask on so crooked. He held a gun, too. It looked big in his hand, not like Sal's. Bobby couldn't take his eyes off it. He lifted his hands. Please, listen. I'm just here, I can't... The words trailed away. He had no idea what to beg for, not with so little faith it would matter. And yet, as that first wave of terror broke, he suffered an eerie sense of familiarity. The way the man carried himself. The eyes, for sure. 6 hours earlier, Bobby stood at the stove in his apartment, begging a kettle of water to boil, and listening as Trink tore through the bathroom medicine cabinet and vanity drawers, desperate for an inhaler she hadn't sucked dry. Bobby called out, Trink, what did you wear last night? Check the pockets. Easy now, he thought. You freak, she freaks, the whole thing spins out of control. From the bathroom, her raspy breath bit like a saw down her throat and lungs. She would have screamed if she'd had the air. Bottles crashed as she tried to exhale, couldn't. The carbon dioxide was building up, the toxicity in her blood. Couple of minutes she'd black out. Worse if he didn't get her to emergency in time. The tea kettle whistled, and Bobby snatched it from the stovetop, burned his hand, dropped the thing. No, fuck, no. He grabbed a towel, dodging barefoot the puddle of scalding water as he picked up the kettle and shook it, checking to see how much remained. Spinning back to the sink, he doused the coffee grounds in the drip filter, splashing gritty schmutz everywhere. Just enough for a good half cup, he thought. Plenty strong that way. Think positive. He stumbled to the bathroom. Trink sat in a heap on the floor, clutching the edge of the sink with a pale skeletal hand, chest heaving as she sucked on a small silver canister of albuterol. She'd used up all her Asthmacort, and her dependency on the albuterol was the latest turn of bad luck. Before that, it had been the mold infiltration in the apartment walls, an endless bout of flu they'd passed back and forth since Halloween, a case of thrush in her mouth from the inhalants. Then the topper, the elevator. 2 months now, the thing was locked between floors. You complained to the landlord, he'd just say, "Blame rent control," and slam down the phone. They lived on the 7th floor. Might as well be the top of Mount Sutro. For all intents and purposes, Trink was a prisoner. Bobby knelt beside her as she pressed the plunger on her inhaler one more time, sucking deep on the spray. Dark patches rimmed her eyes, which were spent and glazed. "You strong enough to walk to the kitchen, or you want me to bring the coffee in?" She shook her head like she couldn't believe he'd ask such a thing, twitching from the pain in her diaphragm. Her breath came in quick, shallow tremors, and she rubbed her throat. "I'll be just a second." He collected the half-cup of coffee from the kitchen sink and hurried back. In a mock accent, vaguely Transylvanian, he said, "Black like night, strong like bull," trying to joke, turn the mood around. She'd inherited most of her features from her dad, her poor constitution and bone-white skin from her mom. Tiny, with bird-like legs and arms, she spread oddly wide at the hips, square in the can, small-breasted with an upturned nose and a sloping jaw that gave her a strangely vixenish underbite. Her lips were plump, curving wickedly at the edges, and she had the kind of wintry blue eyes that could stop you dead. Her pixie haircut accentuated how small she was to wear, in her cotton briefs and tank top, barefoot. Gasping for breath on the cold, hard floor, she looked like a dying child. Except for the tattoos. "Get me the aspirin." She fluttered her hand toward the medicine cabinet. Bobby obliged. It would mean she'd taken every conceivable measure to stop the attack, and she popped 3 tablets with the coffee. Settling back against the wall, legs tucked up under her, she gathered a few even breaths, then said, "It's not fair. I eat like nothing that's not green. I cut out the sugar, cut out the salt, the wheat. Well, most of the wheat. No wine, no whiskey, just vodka." Bobby smiled. Yes, well, ahem, he thought. You still smoke. "You do what they tell you," she said. "You should catch some slack." She'd started smoking at age 8. Her 3 older brothers were out in the peat mounds that belonged to the greenhouse behind the schoolyard. Trink, Jennifer Trinka, 3rd grade, star of the C Elementary, snuck up, spotted them passing the Marlboro pack around. "I'm telling," she hissed, then fled. They ran after her, forced her to the ground, and made her smoke with them, and said if she told on them, they'd tell on her. Did that every day for a month, till they didn't need to hold her down anymore. 2 years passed before she caught on to what a lame threat they'd made, and by then she had a half-pack-a-day habit, 10 years old. The asthma kicked in not long after, when she hit puberty. She had a 2-pack habit by then. She'd been flirting with suffocation ever since, working cocktail, chip girl, rooms hazed with smoke. With the heel of her hand, she wiped at one eye, then the other. "Not fucking fair." No, it's not. What could he say? She was his girl. "I don't want to die in this hellhole, Roper, okay? I'm working on it." An old pit boss of Bobby's from his Reno days had settled in Minden, gotten in touch, said he had a housing deal. Come up with 30 grand, he said. He could work them into a condo meant for the casino staff, rig the financing through the union. Nothing magnificent. 3 rooms and a kitchen, but Bobby had no credit, name a gambler who did. He couldn't be choosy. And it was high desert, good for asthmatics. Bobby'd been doing all right getting the money together, till Trink's string of therapeutic sidetracks and sudden disasters this past year, acupuncture, allergy tests, a pneumonia booster, then the thrush and the mold and the flu and 4 trips to emergency where they amped her up on adrenaline so bad they had to monitor her for heart attack, after which she felt like the nurses had gone at her with hammers. And given her asthma, insurance? Forget about it. Every single payout for care or meds came out of pocket, full price. She couldn't work anymore. With the elevator out, couldn't even leave the apartment. Bobby was on his own, down to his last 18 grand, kept in his player's bank at the Eucalyptus Room. He'd lose that too if he didn't do something. It was why he'd jumped on Sal's offer, decided to buy into his new secret partnership. He needed a chance to score big. Trink pursed her lips, chest shivering as she exhaled. "Just once in my life, Roper. I'd love not to have to think about my next breath, you know." Bobby had gone to college and he'd studied enough psych to know what was going on. The imprint, so to speak. He was drawn to wounded birds, women who were self-tortured victims of their own poor judgment, like his mother. He'd been an only child, she a single mom, and they'd moved around a lot. Bobby'd only known his father through photographs. He'd been handsome with an effortless grace about him, generous with a smile and never seeming ill at ease in front of the camera. At least until Bobby's mother got pregnant. The snapshots ended then, along with the marriage. By the time Bobby was old enough to understand what a father was, his was nothing more than a rumor told to him when his mother drank. She called him a sociopath, or if she was feeling clever, a born salesman. He liked his games, horses, cards, liked his liquor and his girls, and he'd disappear for days, weeks sometimes, then come back smelling of drink and gamey sweat and another woman's bed. When he left, he said he'd never wanted a family, and how cruel could she be bringing a kid into the world when she knew that. It took 20 years for his mother to finally drag her heart out of its box to meet somebody new. Ralph Stoudemire. He brokered professional liability coverage and taught ballroom dancing. The dancing, it was like Bobby's mom had been reborn. "Come visit us, Bobby, couldn't you? Your mother's happy for once, do you understand?" Bobby met them for drinks at the Embarcadero Hyatt in San Francisco. Bobby's mom, the chain-smoking English teacher, wore lipstick and eyeliner and rouge, first time in years, and a cocktail dress, high heels. Ralph wore a blue blazer and brown slacks, reeking of cologne and breath mints. It was like a prom date, the light in their eyes when they sat together, the giggles, the furtive little pinches. Then the hotel orchestra struck up Begin the Beguine. Ralph shot to his feet, pulling her with him, and they were gone. The dark dance floor shimmered from a recent waxing, and their reflections flickered beneath them as they swirled and stopped and circled, defying gravity for a little while. Not long enough. 6 months later, after Ralph emptied all her accounts and disappeared, Bobby's mom climbed out of the bottle just long enough to say, "That's it, I'm done. Men leave, they take everything, and they don't come back. I'm only so brave." And there you had it, Bobby thought. He'd both mimicked and defied the example of the men in his mother's life, admiring their swagger, their cutthroat charm, their worldliness, but bettering them by being smarter, stronger, loyal. He hadn't left Trink. He'd stayed. He'd taken nothing from her. On the contrary, he'd given all he had. Bobby knew he owed some of that to Sal. They shared an odd simpatico, all the more strange because of the vast difference between them. Bobby'd been little more than a smartass with a talent for cards when he'd shown up at the Eucalyptus Room. Sal made a gambler, a man out of him, not so much because of anything he'd said or done, just by example. And that, Bobby suspected, made Sal the kind of man he'd been secretly hunting for all his life. Not a father figure, but not one of his mother's mistakes either. Bobby understood perfectly well that the buy-in for Sal's offer was $50, but he figured if he could just scratch up an extra $2, show up with $20 even, Sal might negotiate. And in 3 months, the way Sal had pitched the deal, Bobby could turn the $20 into $30, cash out, send his old pit boss the down, and get Trink where she needed to be, up in the thin, cold air, the sun-bleached heat, the high desert. But he still needed another $2,000. That was where Eddie Mott came in. Bobby had to cab it to the Richmond district where Eddie lived because his own car had died, and he couldn't throw good money after bad right now. Eddie's wife, a Korean named Claudia, opened the door, all 5 feet of her. She wore a washed-out house dress, hair in rollers, gazing up at Bobby through smudged glasses. There was no explaining gamblers and their wives, Bobby realized, but he'd always thought Eddie had stooped particularly low. Claudia spoke in short, shrill bursts of sound, like a swim coach with his whistle. "Eddie not here. Mother's house." She gave Bobby the address, then slammed the door. The place was clear across town in Echo Park. It cost Bobby $43 with tip to get there by cab, and he figured he'd be wise to hit up Eddie for that as well. He was down to $56 pocket money. The taxi let him out in front of a stucco duplex. Mud-colored stains fingered down from the rain gutters, and mold speckled the window ledges. Every house on the narrow street looked as bad, if not worse. A brisk wind blew trash down the sidewalks. Bobby tried the door, discovered it open. "Eddie?" Passing through the doorway, he entered a museum of motherly kitsch glazed with dust. The place stank of mildew, the windows all closed tight, plus a heavy stench of gas. But there was a foul human smell, too. Bobby found Eddie in the kitchen, perched like a toad on a tiny wood footstool, staring at a sun-faded flower print bedsheet covering a lumpy shape. The odors were worse in here. The oven door stood open. Duct tape sealed the windows and still hung tattered along the edges of the doorway. "Eddie, hey," Bobby whispered, thinking, "Good God." Eddie glanced just once at Bobby, nodded, then returned his gaze to the washed-out bedsheet. "I had to move her. They're gonna get pissed, the cops, I mean. But fuck them, I had to." Eddie was possibly the most placid person Bobby knew, but he sensed something dark, something hostile, dragging at his voice like an undertow. Bobby slipped up behind, squeezed Eddie's shoulder. "Christ, Eddie, this is, I don't know, terrible." Eddie nodded solemnly. He was a hulking, soft, plain man with a wardrobe from Sears, gray, beige, white, more gray, and a face memorable solely due to his horn-rimmed glasses. His life consisted of repairing computers in his garage and playing cards. "She called out of the blue, left a message. 'I'm going away, don't worry if I don't answer the phone.' That was it. Her voice, I don't know. I just had a feeling." Bobby tried to picture it, a mother calling like that. He felt scared suddenly about his own mom and made a mental note to phone her. It had been a while. "People don't die the way you think, Bobby. Smell that?" Eddie's nostrils flared and he winced, pushing his glasses up the bridge of his nose. "Not the gas, the other thing. I cleaned up most of it, but, you know, the muscles relax. Not right, cops find her like that." "Respect, Eddie. It's important." Bobby felt desperate for air. "Hey, listen, this probably isn't the best time, but Her head in the fucking oven, Bobby. It's a message. I don't feel despair here, Bobby. I feel anger. Yeah, but whose? Bobby wondered. Don't take this on yourself, Edster. Old folks, they get depressed. 62, Bobby. Just 62, that's young. Too young, Eddie. You're right, what can I say? Listen, gotta admit, can't say I cared for her all that much, you know. Used my old man up like a bag of peas. Me, I was just the errand boy. But you know, today of all days, she's my mother. And what ain't right ain't right. Bobby was kneading Eddie's shoulders now, working them like a weight room trainer. Eddie, I understand totally. The human condition, it's supremely whack. Now, like I said, this ain't the best time, I realize. A loud knock sounded at the front door. Bobby spotted 2 cops venturing in through the living room. Anybody? Hello? Like that, Eddie shot to his feet. Look who decided to show the fuck up. He hitched up his belt and lurched into the living room. That all my mother means to you guys? Just another yeah? Sir, the lead cop said, raising his hand. Back up. No, Bobby thought, this can't happen. Out of the corner of his eye, he spotted Eddie's keyring on the kitchen counter as the voices in the living room started to boil. Eddie's headed for lockup, Bobby thought. What good's his car to him? He snatched the keys, shoved them in his pocket, as the same cop shouted, I meant what I said. Back the fuck up, fat man, or we do the dance. The next few hours dragged by like a Swedish movie. The cops wouldn't let Bobby go till they could write out a report, and Eddie just kept cycling through paranoid fits of guilty rage and sad sack crying jags, at one point mewling in misery on one cop's shoulder, same cop he took a swing at not 30 seconds later. That was when they put the cuffs on and called for backup. When Bobby tried to suggest that everybody just, chill, he got told to shut up and sit tight or he'd be joining his friend in stir. Bobby slinked off to the kitchen table, where he sat and chewed his thumbnail, watching the hands on the clock while more and more cops showed up. Even the Neptune Society got there before Bobby could finally steal one of the cops into a corner and talk him into jotting down enough so he could leave. Eddie, you be strong. Bobby waved goodbye through the crowd of uniforms. Backing into the living room, he collided with the crematorium's gurney. It scared a little yelp out of him, and he spun around, apologizing to the bored tech who just sat there on the couch, paging through an ancient copy of the Portrero Bingo Beacon. Out on the street, Bobby spotted Eddie's car, blocking a driveway. It was one of the new VW Bugs. White, of course, dullest color they had, and automatic. Not a stick, check it out, he thought. One of the cops had written Eddie a ticket. That was cold. Bobby snatched the ticket from under the windshield wiper, tossed it into the gutter, then got behind the wheel and drove off as fast as he could. He'd tell Eddie later that he'd only borrowed the Bug because Eddie himself insisted, so Bobby could come around the county lockup later, bail him out, drive him home. Eddie'd be too drunk from his own mood swings to remember for sure what he had and hadn't said the past few hours. Bobby gassed the Bug's throaty little turbo through Visitation Valley and up the rim of hills connecting Candlestick with the San Bruno Range, dropping down again at Oyster Point and following the Bayshore Freeway south. The eucalyptus room sat along the briny mud flats lining the Dumbarton Bridge approach. He pulled into the parking lot just before the 10 o'clock closing. Okay, he thought. No $2,000. But it wasn't like Eddie refused. That's what he'd tell Sal, just a temporary setback. Bad luck. Bobby'd moved back to the Bay Area 2 years earlier after leaving Chico State without a degree and working the tables in Reno for a while. His mother had moved to Albuquerque for a total lifestyle makeover, so San Francisco seemed like a whole new city. No dreary echoes, no morbid shadows. He quickly found his way to the peninsula south of town and marveled at how much money rolled through the card rooms. The peninsula served the same sort of role to San Francisco as North Jersey did to New York, the Bayshore Freeway standing in for the Holland Tunnel. Down there, among all the suburbs with their car lots and strip malls and office parks, you had players with real money and more attitude than card sense. Bobby ended up favoring the Eucalyptus Room, Sal Lazarini's place, down in East Palo Alto. It had a reputation for hard play at the 60-120 tables and was rumored to draw a rough crowd. But all that was fine with Bobby. He'd learned to play poker with sawed-off roughneck sorts, long haulers, skip tracers, meth-head carpenters, and boozy chain-smoking barbers, the kind of creatures who inhabited the slummy neighborhoods his mother could afford to live in. Those guys would have fit in like furniture at the Eucalyptus Room. Besides, there was this chip girl there. Her name was Jennifer Trinka. She wore her hair longer then, halfway down her back in long permed curls. It set off the soft, smooth whiteness of her skin and the hard, cold blue of her eyes. Boyish in the chest, she emphasized her legs instead, wearing kinky heels and shameless skirts. Guys at the tables couldn't love her enough. Bobby knew he couldn't just make his play from the floor like every other mope. He needed status. He hung around, doing the railbird bit, making idle chat with the help and hoping to team up with someone, play partners at a high-spread table. It was the only way to make real money in a room like that. You had fools getting hosed at Texas Hold'em and lowball, 40 hands per hour. Meanwhile, across the room, Asians threw insane amounts of money away at Pai Gow and Pan 9, thrilling Sal since the house had a stake in every ante and winning pot. As Bobby settled in over time, he seemed to get along okay with folks. He had a talent for that, getting along, but couldn't quite get that second leg over, especially with Sal. Then one night, Trink sidled up, smiling like she knew something he didn't. "Mr. Lazzarini would like a word." Bobby followed her back to the office, memorizing the tiny waist, the rippling black hair, the pendulum action of her strangely boxy tush, marveling at the strong, stockinged legs with her tattoos peeking through the mesh. At the office door, she turned like a game show hostess and gestured him inside. "You joining us?" He tried not to sound too hopeful. She didn't answer, but he noticed that her smile lingered as she walked away. It was the first time Bobby'd been in the office. First time alone with Sal, for that matter. They'd traded nods and smiles on the floor, but never spoken beyond small talk. But Bobby already knew he liked Sal, respected him. He seemed unbothered by doubt, as though thought was just a kind of action. You sized up a man asking for credit, you tallied odds, and beyond that, reflection was pointless, counterproductive, even dangerous. The office, small and plain, smelled like an ashtray, hugger-mugger with display cases and file cabinets piled high with tottering stacks of tally sheets. Sal sat behind his cluttered desk. The only other place to sit was a sofa made of white naugahyde that brought to mind Las Vegas in the 50s. Somebody had to kill a lot of Cadillacs to make this thing, Bobby thought, sitting down. He offered a deferential smile and waited to be spoken to. Sal, a pair of cheaters slung low on his nose, jotted figures in a ledger. "You like it here," he said finally, not looking up. "The card room, I mean." "Very much." "See you a lot around the tables, checking things out." "Yeah." The phrase caught Bobby's ear funny, checking things out. He leaned forward, whispering for comic effect. "That's not a problem, right?" He cracked a grin that Sal, glancing up finally, did not return. "There's some people out there think you're a cop. Any truth in that?" Bobby's throat closed up. He dressed straight, not showy, slacks and sport jackets, Oxford button-downs. It was easier to get marks at the tables to trust you that way. He hadn't thought it also might make him look narky. And yeah, he'd been hanging around trying to get folks to like him, trust him. I mean, it's okay if you are. Sal studied him, taking his time. I don't mind if cops hang out. Kinda hope they do, to be honest. Anything crooked goes down in my store, I want to know about it. Horse shit, Bobby thought. There was talk 2 city council members were silent partners in the club, and that drove the local cops nuts. They saw the Eucalyptus Room as a flashpoint for trouble. Beyond the hard play and rumors of time advances at the tables, you had chip girls not just sneaking loans, but dealing crack out of their aprons. Known bookies and fences waltzing around like kings. A pair of Filipino bank robbers who confessed their heists were driven by gambling losses at the Pai Gao tables. 2 stolen cars had been found in the parking lot just last week. Some sorry schmuck had been kidnapped after winning 10 grand, and another had been robbed and knifed. Finding his voice finally, Bobby said, "I'm not a cop." Sal rose to his feet behind his desk and stuck out his meaty hand. His eyes said, "Time will tell." Pleasure talking, finally. Back on the floor, Bobby hunted up a house prop named Gap Quattrone. Props were players staked by the house to team up on suckers, hold them at the tables, and keep them losing. Bobby'd sat there one night watching Gap and his partner take a car salesman for 22 grand over 15 straight hours of play. The code they used was primitive. Knee knocks and ear pulls so obvious they could have been Little League coaches signaling from the dugout. Bobby found Gap, the name was short for Gaspar, standing at a sink in the men's, combing his wavy blonde hair. "Join me outside for a smoke?" It was a clear spring night, the racket from Highway 101 unusually loud, like always after a rain. Bobby lit a cigarette for himself, held the match out for Gap, too, and tried to think of how to begin. Gap cupped his hands to the flame, looking almost perfect in its flickering light. Gap could have been a Hollywood actor. Not a star, but one of those faces you always recognize but can seldom put a name to. The guy, you'd say. Which guy? You know, the guy. The too-slick weatherman whose wife walks out first scene in the movie. The psycho killer's hip but not hip enough neighbor. First bad guy in the Florida prison break the alligators drag under. Gap looked good. Not great, but he did things, even little things. A wink for the cocktail waitress, a drag from his cigarette, like he knew you were watching. And you were. Finally, sensing the moment was right, Bobby said, "Look, I know you're playing partners. The guys you team with are a joke, and your code's so gross my grandmother's canasta group could nail you. People think I'm a cop. Well, tell you what. I'll teach you a code nobody will catch, and if I'm a cop, that's entrapment, so I've just given you an ironclad defense. What do you say?" Things improved after that. Gap picked up fast on Bobby's routine, fanning his cards left or right depending on whether he intended to stay in or fold, using stage business with his chips or his cigarettes or his coffee cup to signal ace, king, queen, jack, and how many of each, changing the code around several times a night. Bobby even taught him how to deal seconds and from the bottom. They practiced together till their hand movements possessed the required subtlety and they could read each other without needing to look straight on. On Gap's good word, Sal finally changed his take on Bobby, staking him with house money, then taking half of what he and Gap won on any night. Business was good. The Nevada houses were closing their poker operations due to the competition from the California card rooms. The casinos never much liked the poker crowd anyway. They generated little side action and tended to prey on the tourists. And so the money started drifting into the Eucalyptus Room. Some players smarter than others, but few of them smart enough. Even the ones who caught on backed down once they realized doing anything meant dealing with Sal. There were still those around the club who called Bobby Professor because he'd been to college, or Junior because of his youth, hoping to somehow undermine his growing bond with Sal. And when it got out that he'd majored but never earned a degree in English, same subject his mother had taught in high school, the badgering turned heartless. He could hardly have done worse studying interpretive dance. In some ways, it worked to his advantage, the mockery. The suckers didn't take him seriously, and it made them easier to play. But there was a bite of vengefulness to some of it that made his deepening bond with Sal crucial. Sal suffered no fools. His regard for Bobby meant standing, protection. And an extra advantage came with that. With Bobby squarely in Sal's good graces, Trink finally took him seriously. They started with after-shift breakfasts. Bobby would sit there listening to the latest version of The Perils of Jennifer Trinka and watch as she sent her scrambled eggs back to the kitchen time and time again till they came back rubbery like gum erasers. "There's only one thing runny I want in my mouth," she'd tell him, and he couldn't hear it enough. 6 weeks later, they were living together. He'd never done that before. Never bought jewelry for a woman either, or sat on the toilet and watched as she lathered and shaved her legs in the tub. Never shared a beer for Saturday breakfast, or had a woman tell him as he lay with her in bed, "You can do anything you want. Just give me some warning if you're going to hit me, okay?" But Bobby wasn't a hitter. It was all he could do to oblige her request that he hold her down during sex. One more legacy of the schoolyard bullying she took from her brothers when she was 8. She liked to struggle with him on top of her, same way she liked to smoke. One night, Sal came up, gestured Bobby and Gap away from their game. Once he had them off the floor, he said, "Come with me, okay? I need somebody to see this." They drove to a nearby watering hole called the 8-Ball, a jump joint like most bars in East Palo Alto. Phil Vogel sat alone on his stool, sagging like his spine had turned to putty and staring into his glass. Crumpled bills, too many, sat in plain view, inviting trouble. The bartender who'd called Sal at the club nodded as though to say, "Get him out of here." The other customers, some of whom wore prison tats or gang colors, made no secret of their curiosity. They sipped Hennessy and Coke, or bottled malt liquor, prowled around the pool table or chewed on plastic straws at the tables near the back, eyeing Phil and Sal and Gap and Bobby like the Marx Brothers had just shown up. Sal came up behind his partner and leaned close. "Time to knock off, Phil. Let's go while the going's good." Phil shot a screw-you look at Sal in the mirror, not straight on, then gestured to the bartender for another. Sal glanced up at the bartender and shook his head. "You think I'm joking? Come on. We'll drive you back to the club." Sal slipped his hand under Phil's arm, but the sad fat drunk broke free, stumbling off his stool in a wild-limbed stagger, then spinning around. He fumbled in his pocket for something. "Where would you be, huh? Without me? Where?" He pulled from his pocket what he wanted, finally, a femmy little .22, wiggling it in the air. He looked like he wanted to cry, which was what Bobby felt like doing too once he saw the pistol sailing around like that. Didn't matter how small it was, Bobby hated guns. It was almost a phobia, like some people with spiders or heights. You could talk a man out of almost anything, you did it right, but a gun, it just does what it was built for. It tore open flesh. It ripped arteries and muscles apart. He doesn't even have to want to, Bobby thought. Accidents happen. Sal didn't so much as glance at the weapon, just stared into his partner's roomy eyes. "You sad old faggot." He turned to the bartender. "Call the cops on this piece of crap." Then, turning to Gap and Bobby, "Let's get back to work." Bobby stood frozen in place, still staring at the gun. Gap took notice and whispered, "Come on," grabbing Bobby's sleeve. "Never let Jiggs see you scared." The bartender called out, I ain't calling no cops on his ass. Don't need that kind of trouble. You haul his sorry drunk butt on out of here." But Sal just kept walking. Bobby couldn't follow him fast enough, and Gap took up the rear, making sure Phil didn't shoot and nobody else came after them. In the car, once they were on their way, Sal said quietly to Bobby, "What happened back there? Don't think I didn't notice." Bobby sank in his seat. He hated failing Sal. "Never been much of a fighter." "Not what I meant." With his thumb, Sal plunged in the dash lighter for the cigarette now bobbing between his lips. "I saw how scared you were, but you didn't embarrass yourself. Or me. I appreciate that." Back at the club, Sal told Bobby and Gap to follow him into the office. "Close the door." He poured each of them a few fingers of cutty, took a long sip of his own. "Draws a gun, the fat cunt. I'd call that a final goddamn straw. How about you?" Before either of them could answer, he added, "Either of you guys like to buy into a new room?" The man in the ski mask and baggy brown suit remained motionless in the doorway to Sal's office, gun trained straight at Bobby's face. Gap, put it down, okay? No need for that." Bobby stared up from where he knelt on the floor, hands held out to either side. "Think I wouldn't know your eyes? I'm sorry, but hey!" The man stood there, blinking, as the gun barrel sank in almost imperceptible degrees. With his free hand, he reached up, pulled the ski mask off. Strands of his curly blonde hair hovered from the static. Eyes whirling, he seemed wildly confused. He didn't look so much like a Hollywood type right then. "You know what he was gonna do, right?" "Gap, what? Sal, he—" "No, Bobby, listen to me. Place in Burlingame he talked about. He's got no lease. Management companies never heard of him. But the points, Gap. I know the guys, 10, maybe a dozen. They put—" "Shut up! Listen to me. It's bullshit. There are no points. He was just going to close up tonight, run with the cash." Bobby got up from the floor, using Sal's desk to pull himself onto his feet. His head spun. "Sal wouldn't do that. You simple. It was done." "I don't know, Gap. Jesus." Bobby nodded to the gun. "You mind putting that thing away?" Gap let the pistol hang beside his leg, but didn't slip it into his pocket. "What was I supposed to do, Bobby? He had a gun, too." Bobby moved toward the door. "We should check, see how bad he is." Gap cut him off. "I'm going to get inside the safe." "Gap, it's Sal out there." "I know who the fuck it is. He's a goddamn thief." Sweat broke out on Gap's face. He raised his gun again, shouting now. "Okay, you got your chance. Go on home. I'm getting in that safe." Gap waited, trying to nudge Bobby out the back way by waving the nose of the gun in that direction. But Bobby couldn't move. Giving up, Gap dropped down behind Sal's desk and knelt before the vault. Bobby considered going out, checking on Sal. But as Gap worked the tumblers, it dawned on him. Since when has he been planning this? More to the point, why didn't he ever tell me? "I got $18,000 in there, Gap. My money, okay?" He eased around the corner of the desk. I can't afford to lose my bank. Trink, she's real sick. I can't—" Gap said nothing, just kept spinning the dial back and forth. Bobby, watching, got it then. Gap had no clue what the combination was. "Gap, what's going on here? What's this about?" He stood too close to ask a question like that. Sure enough, Gap spun around and the gun came with him. Bobby spooked, trying to swat the barrel away, but his hand sailed high. Gap took it for a blow and, on instinct, fired. The bullet ripped into Bobby's arm. Maybe a second passed, maybe 1,000th of a second. But Bobby stared at the small black hole torn into the fabric of his jacket a little above the elbow. He felt the first pop of blood, and then at last the pain. His whole arm erupted like it had been set on fire. He cringed, winced, danced this way and that, biting his lip with all his might to keep from screaming. "What the hell you do that for?" Both of them, same words, same time, shouted over one another. The next thing Bobby knew, he was running out the back door Sal had told him to take in the first place. He couldn't tell if Gap was right behind, didn't dare look. He threw the lock on the door, pushed with his shoulder, and tumbled out into the parking lot. The leaves of the eucalyptus trees shivered in a brisk wind, driven by an incoming storm. Bobby's cheeks grew wet from tears as he ran to Eddie's bug, fumbled left-handed into his right coat pocket, digging for the keys. Gap would be there any second to finish him off, and Bobby wondered at what was taking him, but then he was behind the wheel, cranking the ignition and lodging the tranny left-handed, fishtailing away toward the freeway. His vision blurred as he sped north. Not just the tears, the blood loss. He was going into shock, feeling the cold possess his hands, his feet. Bullet must have hit an artery, he thought. Get yourself to a hospital. But Gap would come hunting for him, wouldn't he, to finish things? Sooner or later, probably sooner, he'd show up at the apartment. Trink was there alone. He had to fight to keep from weaving lane to lane as he passed Candlestick Point, accelerated to clear the hill, then descended past Bayview, Portola, Silver Terrace. You should call 911, he thought. Tell them about Sal. But he didn't dare stop, and with his arm hurt so bad he couldn't dig into his pocket for his cell phone and try to drive at the same time. "I'm sorry, Sal," he whispered. The pain spread from his arm into his shoulder, his chest, his throat. He wet himself, feeling scared like he'd never felt scared before, and thinking of Eddie's mother, the smell in that house, wondering which had come first, death or the letting go. He didn't even remember the rest of the drive or where he parked, just found himself trying to climb the 7 impossible flights of stairs to the apartment. Dragging himself up along the handrail, his mind in a fog, he paused for breath at each landing with his bloody arm hanging there. The pain was everywhere now, not just his arm. He stank and had to fight from hurling, but he made it to the 6th floor, stiffened his resolve, and reached the next landing halfway up. Wait now, he thought. Maybe she's already used up the last of the albuterol. Remember, stress is a trigger. Imagine how you look. You just tumble in like this, she'll have an attack. Too many problems at once, too many patients. Think it through. He knelt, hoping for just a moment to clear his head. Twisting himself into a seated position, he panted, dry-mouthed, drenched in sweat, with blood caked down his sleeve, fingers sticky with it. Beneath the gore, the skin had turned a yellowish gray. Phantom shadows darted along the edges of his field of vision, and to escape them he closed his eyes. From above, he heard a door lock click. Eyes blinking open, he saw Trink staring down at him, still dressed in her underwear. But she'd pulled on one of Bobby's button-down shirts as a wrap. A lit cigarette dangled between her fingers, sneaking a midnight smoke while she waited for him to come home. Bad timing, Bobby thought. "Roper?" Before he could get a word out, her chest started heaving. Her mouth shot open, but no sound came. She dropped the cigarette and reached out blindly for the railing, finding it finally, gripping it with both hands, standing as long as she could, but then her knees gave way with an awkward, rubbery trembling. The whole time, her eyes stayed fixed on his, staring down at him like he'd turned into something terrible. "Baby, you gotta try," he said, loud as he could without drawing out the neighbors, his voice hoarse, throat parched. "You gotta get up, Trink. You gotta turn around now. Go back in. Get your inhaler. Or if that's all used up, make coffee, right? A couple aspirin, strong black coffee.
You know what to do. Listen, we gotta get out of here. You gotta get me to a hospital, okay? Your turn to take care of me. How about that? Get up now. Come on, Trink. Try.
He might as well have said nothing. Her eyes turned vacant, and she dropped sideways onto the landing, not all at once, but in jerky, helpless staggers as her skin turned a marbled blue. Bobby couldn't get to her, couldn't move. Bad idea, he realized now, too late. Sitting down, as much blood as you've lost. In his impotence, he felt everything give. His vision grayed, his muscles went slack, his pores opened up, and a bitter-smelling sweat beaded on his skin as he whispered, "Trink, please, I am so sorry." She lay on her side, eyes rolled back, mouth slack. "I'd love not to have to think about my next breath." He closed his eyes as a sickening dizziness swept through him, like he was spinning across a dance floor, his reflection flickering beneath him. Gap pulled the car up as close as he could. A crowd had formed outside the apartment building. Jesus! He turned on the wipers to clear the windshield of spattered rain. "This is too nuts. We gotta book, now." Sal, sitting beside him, said nothing, just looked out at the crowd. "I'm gonna go see." He reached for the door handle, but Gap reached across, grabbed his sleeve. "You nuts? We can't stay. Let go of me." Gap didn't need to be told twice. Sal opened the door and stepped out into the street. Gap called after him. "I'm not waiting around forever. I see anything go bad, you get into it with a cop." Sal cut him off. "You'll what? Tell your mother?" Sal kept hidden the fact that Gap was his stepson. It was nobody's business, and you gave people something to get all busy about, they'll do just that. Besides, Sal and Vivian hadn't spoken in years, and what connection he had with her son he'd forged on his own, most of it strangely after the divorce. Sal had that kind of effect on younger men. They liked getting near him, like it was a way to prove themselves. "I need to know where things sit." Sal closed the car door behind him and sauntered through the light rain toward the edge of the crowd. There were too many patrol cars in the street to mean anything but a dead body. He didn't spot the morgue wagon till after. The paramedics apparently had already come and gone. How did such an easy little plan go so bad, he wondered. Gather the cash, fake a stick-up, flash a gun, watch Bobby run scared. What could be simpler? That night at the 8-Ball, when Phil had waved his silly little pistol around, Bobby had turned bone white, nearly crapped his pants. But tonight, Bobby had hung tough. The sorry little imbecile. All for that skinny, homely freak of a chip girl. What was her name? Treblinka? That's love for you, Sal thought. It blinds you, it kills you. And then everybody left behind stands around like they haven't got a clue how a thing like this could happen, but feeling secretly fascinated, even a little jealous. He and Gap had the other marks roped in already, $300,000. The only one left had been Bobby, and he was last because they'd fought about it. It was too easy, Sal said, taking Bobby's money, but it wasn't just that. It was the way Bobby looked up to him. Sal had no problem milking suckers. It was why they existed. But Gap had pushed. They'd need every dime in Belize. The casinos were opening there, moving south from Cancun. Get positioned now, it'll be like Cuba before Castro. And Bobby won't suffer too long or hard. Don't waste tears on him. He was young enough, smart enough to start over, which wasn't true for Sal. The weariness in his body turned leaden as he watched the coroner's staff wheel out a gurney with a body bag. He couldn't take his eyes off it. What happened? Sal directed the question to a woman on the edge of the crowd. She was in her 30s, buck teeth, freckles, short hair, wearing a drab robe over sweats. She studied him a moment. Sal wondered what he must look like. His white hair sagged down onto his ears with the rain. This couple on the 7th floor, she said finally. They're both dead. Both, Sal thought. The girl, too. God help me. You live here? It came out strangely needy.
Yeah,
she answered, wary but curious. And you know them? The two who died, I mean.
Not much.
She shrugged.
A little.
She bit her lip, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I thought they were carnies or something, the way the girl was tattooed. And stupid, but weird, too. I mean, she'd walk around practically naked, and the guy was like hypnotized. She just kept talking after that, like he'd tripped a valve. A busybody litany of brief, edgy encounters in the lobby, the laundry room, on the stairs, described as though in some odd, misbegotten way Bobby and the girl had deserved to die. Even as Sal told himself he should go, there was nothing this woman had to say he needed to hear. He couldn't tear himself away. Glancing back at the car, he saw Gap gesturing, "Hurry up, come on, let's go." But the woman's voice, the continuous stream of her unkind words, seemed oddly reassuring. Hypnotized, he thought. Yeah, exactly. Something like this was bound to happen sooner or later. To them. He turned back toward the woman and started nodding along, wanting nothing so much as for her to keep talking.